More and more business is being done across cultures, and teams are being built with people from around the world, working side by side or virtually. In Canada, I worked on a team with teammates from Canada, Norway, Italy, and China. I've worked at the United Nations in Chile, at a major insurance company in Canada, and I've co-founded a company here in China. I speak 4 languages and have lived and worked in 7 countries and have visited over 35 nations. Needless to say, I am passionate about doing business across cultures. In this video, I'm going to share my #1 insight into understanding cross-cultural communication and concrete steps you can take immediately to improve the communication on your cross-cultural team. Coming up. In our corporate training program, Crossing Cultures, we use the culture map model developed by Aaron Meyer. It focuses on 8 dimensions of behavior and how they vary across cultures. Let's look at one of the dimensions, communicating. On the communicating dimension, there are low context cultures on the left and high context cultures on the right. In low context cultures, good communication is precise, simple, and clear. Messages are expressed and understood at face value, meaning a yes is a yes and a no is a no. And lastly, repetition and summarizing are appreciated if it helps to clarify the message. In high context cultures, on the other hand, good communication is sophisticated, nuanced, and layered. Messages are both spoken and read between the lines. And finally, messages are often implied and not plainly expressed. Now that we have those definitions, let's take a look at where some countries lie on the communicating dimension. The US and Canada are very low context communication cultures. Germans and Brits tend to be more low context as well. Mexico and France are more high context, and on the more extreme side of high context communication cultures are Japan, Korea, and China. Let's look at some examples. We'll use common situations comparing low context and high context communication to help you further understand the difference. Example 1, giving directions. A businessman is going to a meeting in a city he has never been to before. He told the receptionist he has the address, but needs to know how to get there from his hotel. Let's look at a potential response from a receptionist from a low context culture versus a high context culture. Low context. The office is near Guomao subway stop. Take exit A and turn right, going north. Walk for about 50 meters until you reach a T intersection at Willow Avenue. Cross the street and you'll see a museum. Keep walking past the museum and the entrance to the office tower will be on the left. Enter through the first set of doors and go up to the 18th floor. Versus high context. The office is one of the shiny new towers right next to the oldest museum in the city. You can't miss it. For someone who has the same shared knowledge of the oldest museum in the city, it wouldn't be too difficult to find. But if this businessman lacked that knowledge, he'd be bewildered and unable to find his way to the office. Example 2, wrapping up an evening with friends. Low context. That was a fun evening. I have to get up early for work tomorrow, so you guys should get going now. Versus high context. This yawn is a great example of how high context communication can often focus on reading the air, paying attention to what's not being said or what is implied. I am yawning, therefore I am tired, therefore I want to go to bed, therefore you must leave. Example 3, offering food to a guest. Lori is visiting her friend's home in another city to stay for a few days. She just arrived at 10 p.m. after a 6-hour train ride. The host, Karen, expects her friend to be hungry, so she asks, "Lori, would you like something to eat before going to bed?" Low context. Karen, hungry? Lori, yes please, I'm starving. Karen, I thought so, I'll make you something. Versus high context. Karen, would you like something to eat? Lori, no thank you. Karen, are you sure you aren't hungry? Lori, you are so generous, but I should probably get to sleep. Karen, we have different options depending on how hungry you are. Lori, I cannot refuse your hospitality. You are too kind. Karen knows that to be polite, she'll have to ask 3 times to get past 2 polite denials before her friend will say yes. Lori knows that to be polite, she'll have to politely reject the offer twice before accepting a 3rd time. In some high context cultures, if Lori responded in a low context way with an immediate, yes please, I'm starving, that would be considered inelegant and perhaps quite rude. If Karen, the host, was low context and only asked Lori once, Lori would probably be going to bed hungry and disappointed, thinking her host was rude. Let's continue with 2 more short examples. Example 4. A conversation between a husband and wife while grocery shopping. Low context. You gained some weight last year and I know you want to lose that weight, so let's skip the chocolate ice cream. Versus high context. Can I see the ice cream? I'm curious what they put in it to make it so delicious. Oh wow. I can't believe how many calories are in this. Maybe we can pass for now. And finally, example 5, in a team meeting. Low context. I know there's natural light from the windows, but it's still quite dark in here. Can you please turn the lights on? Versus high context. It's kind of dark in here. In this high context example, there's no need to add those extra details, making it extra clear that they'd like the lights on. The team already understands. Now that we've seen some examples, let me answer the 2 questions you're probably thinking. Number 1, why the difference? And 2, what can my team practically do with this information? Question number 1, why the difference? Countries that are very homogeneous culturally and linguistically, and especially if they have a long history, these countries can communicate clearly using high context communication. They have a shared body of knowledge, common history, common fables, common customs, and common values. It's no surprise that Asian countries like Japan, Korea, and China are far to the right. On the other hand, countries that are culturally and linguistically diverse, especially countries with a shorter history, these countries tend to be low context in their communication. The US and Canada, for example, are melting pots of many cultures through immigration. For people to live and work together, these countries needed to use low context communication because that was what worked as a common denominator for everyone. Question number 2, what can my team practically do with this information? This is the key insight I want to share, which required a bit of explanation first on cross-cultural communication. For communication to be clear within culturally diverse teams, the key is to have low context communication. For example, be explicit and keep communication simple. Clarify and summarize to ensure everyone is on the same page. And if it's important, put it in writing. This doesn't mean low context cultures are better than high context cultures. It's simply that using low context communication means there will be fewer misunderstandings between low and high context cultures and also high and high context cultures. High context communication isn't efficient outside of a specific culture. For example, even though Kenya and China are both high context, their pool of common knowledge, history, customs, norms, etc. is different, so misunderstandings can often occur. Low context is a common denominator to understanding, whereas each country's version of high context communication can be quite unique. Now, I understand you can't expect the way in which your high context teammates communicate to change overnight. People change slowly, but processes can change now. The best way to ensure low context communication is to change your processes. You get the immediate benefit of low context processes, and over time, your people will naturally change too. I've personally seen this happen. One example are Chinese employees who have worked for many years at an international company. These companies usually have low context processes, so these Chinese tend to act and think differently than their countrymen who work at local Chinese companies. Let's now look at a case study to show what low context processes practically look like. Case study, Johnson & Johnson. Pedro Galvez is a Mexican manager at Johnson & Johnson. He leads a team of Mexicans and Saudis. He found, even though both teams tend to be more high context, their communication was breaking down. Here are 3 concrete actions he took to change to low context processes for meetings. First, at the end of each meeting, one person will orally recap the key points. They take turns from meeting to meeting on who will do this. Second, each person will orally summarize their own action points moving forward. And third, one person will send out an email of the key points of the meeting. This is a different person from the one who orally summarized the key points. It takes a bit of work, but it is worth it. The high cost of miscommunication can take a toll on productivity and interpersonal relationships. So there you have it, defining what low and high context cultures are and the best way to communicate on a multicultural team. Low context. Doing business across cultures and working on and leading multicultural teams is more than just communicating. We've taken a brief look at one dimension, and there are 7 more dimensions. If you want more concrete, practical strategies to help your global teams work more efficiently, produce better results, and build stronger relationships, contact us today about our Crossing Cultures training program. As always, thanks for watching. If you found value in this video, make sure to share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe for more content just like this. And we will see you in the next video.